relationship. Our history is there and the rest can't change it. Schools don't teach it. Seek it is sacred. Honor thy mother and father is the basics. Rise like you're supposed to slip out the matrix. Still dumbstruck thinking this is entertainment. Escape to reality. Most lives I keep it raw like.
Number 1, Black Eyes TV 7. Big exclusive. You're watching something special. Can't you see that afro? It's calling you in. This is Black Eyes TV 7, and this is the one and only Arch Degree. Coming to talk to you people, come and talk about the events, talk about all the other things, and we've got exclusive of all the people in Black Eyes TV right around the camera. So, KT,
what's going on?
How's life been so far?
Man, life is beautiful. I'm breathing. Sun's still coming up. You know, I don't got nothing to complain about.
You know, the event yesterday, how did you see it and how did you adapt to the people around you?
Oh, the event was glorious. The reason why I feel that the event was so dope was because it was a women's event. And where I come from, there's not a lot of women on stage. And I'm not saying that it's prevented. There's just not too many women stepping up. And even if there are women that do step up, it's not consistent, you know. So it's really more men that are dealing with disseminating the information. So to see women come out and speak to standing room only, I'm talking about packed with nothing but other women, where those women are there to receive other women's instructions, receiving other women's instructions with no attitude, with no I could do better than that. No debates. Just thank you and love. I mean, women were coming out of there so soft and happy and just ready and light. And I'm like, yo, like that's necessary. So, you know, it's a shame I had to travel across the ocean in order to see that. But I'm glad I did because it was a great experience.
So you always respect the woman.
Oh,
She's like the goddess that whispers into the air.
The whole earth is nothing but women. The clothes we wear are women.
Okay.
Why do you have nipples?
Because my mother produced them.
You know what I'm just saying? Like, why do we even have nipples? I ask people that question all the time. Like, we don't use them for nothing. I think it's just a reminder.
Yeah.
It's a reminder.
You know, so basically, I just want to crack it down to the people because, you know, the one thing that we understand right now, we're in a position where I say that everybody's sick.
Oh, most definitely.
And how do we get to where they can be cured or be better or live better? As they always know that health is your wealth.
That's right.
So I'm going to crack it down for you in the basics of let's go through the paradigm of going from history, going to health and well-being, going into spirit and mind, and then economics.
Okay.
So now let's begin with the history side of things.
Okay.
Give us a little bit of the inside of your history through when you've been growing up from, let's say, a young age.
Okay, so when I was inside my mother's womb, she was still in New York. She was still in the States. And when she was in the States, I'm the youngest, so Red and Blue Pill are my bigger brothers, so they were already here. They 6 years older than me, so it was like 6. I have a sister older than them, about 3 years older than them, so she's 9 years older than me. My mother wasn't on the health tip yet. She was in New York, like moving and shaking. You know, she was getting assistance, you know, from the fathers, obviously, but she herself had to work. But what she noticed was my sister, my brothers, they would get sick from time to time. She ended up like any other mother in an emergency room. And she would get tired of doing that. So one day she went to her mother, my grandmother, and was like, how did you do this? Like, really, like, I just can't understand how every time there's an earache, ear infection, snotty nose, like, over and over, I'm like, I'm burnt. And she looked at my mother, and she was like, I didn't do that. And she was like, you mean what, you was never sick? She was like, no. She was like, how? She was like, oh, because back home, where we come from in the Virgin Islands, every day we would get lined up, and we were given bush tea. bush tea, what's bush tea? And she started talking about the herbs and everything. And she like, why didn't you never tell me this? And this is because my grandmother is part of a group of individuals who got attracted to the allure of America and wanted to chase the American dream. So when she came into America, she got a job, you know, she got her paper and everything, and she wasn't thinking about where she came from any longer until my mother asked, her daughter asked. She didn't try and keep it from her, she told her. So she knew immediately, she was like, I gotta get back home. My mother started having dreams that I was gonna die and she was gonna die if she did not go back home. And in doing that, she packed everything up and she just dipped out of nowhere back to St. Croix. She didn't know what she was going to do or what was there for her. One day, her cousin knocked on the door at 2 in the morning, 2 a.m. Full moon outside. She comes to the door, opens it up. She like, what's up? She was like, yeah, I'm about to go in the rainforest to pick up this iron tonic. You want to come with me?
Eyes must have lit up, especially if you're a scorpion.
Full moon, 2 a.m. in the islands. My mother like, and she pregnant. She like, what? You want to go in the rainforest in the middle of the night to get some tonic? She was like, no, I don't want to go. But she was like, well, I'm about to go. And then it's her cousin. So she like, I can't let you go in the rainforest by yourself at 2 in the morning. She was like, I'll get my things. So they go. They drive in the rainforest. Now, anybody who goes to St. Croix, in order to get in the rainforest, you got to go up into the mountains, round and round and round and round and round to get to the top. It's 2 a.m. The only light is the moonlight being filtered through the trees. So this thing is mystical. It's scary. It's all this stuff. I'm still inside her tummy. So, like, I don't know what's going on, but I could feel what she going through.
Of course, that's what I said. It must have been enlightened.
Man. They finally get to the top. They get out the car. There's nothing there but forest. And she's like, where do we go? Like, what's up? No sooner than she say that, she hear a loud laugh come out the forest. It's just bellowing throughout the forest. She like, who's that? She like, you about to see. They walk through the forest. There's this little trailer just sitting in the forest. They go inside. There's Dr. Sebi. About 5-6 people, kind of like this, just sitting in a room. He going all the way in. So about 2 hours, 3 hours passed by. She pulled all the way in like a tractor beam. She like, yo, this cat's going in. He know what he's talking about. But, you know, my mother, just like most women, like, they ain't just going to run up to somebody and, like, you know, she just soaked it in the first time. She was like, I'll find out on the next go-round. But he didn't let her leave. She was about to go. He grabbed my mother by the arm, looked at her face, pulled her eye down, looked in her eye, said, grabbed her foot, like just yanked it, like if I just grabbed your leg and yanked it up. She like, what the heck? Slapped the hell out of her foot, like he was whooping somebody's baby. And then told her, you're anemic. You need some of my tonic. And she was like, what? Took me a long time to figure out what he was doing, but based upon him looking at the capillaries of the eyes, which are the smallest capillaries in the body, if you're dehydrated, you're going to be able to tell. Slapping the foot, if it stays yellow too long and it doesn't flood with blood, that lets you know you're anemic, you're low on iron, your blood's not flowing properly, right? So, next thing you know, my mother's in the hospital giving birth to me. She hemorrhages, okay? I'm born on a Tuesday, so that's the Ogun energy. So I'm all about iron, blood, and everything. I came in the world in blood. Her hemoglobin level was a 2. Okay? A woman's hemoglobin level is supposed to be like a 14, which means both of us are really clinically dead. You know what I mean? They wanted her to have a blood transfusion. She was like, cool, get my father. Couldn't find my father, so they tried to get a stranger. She said no. They was like, get out. Kicked me out, jaundice. Kicked my mother out with the hemoglobin level of 2. And the only person to call was Sebi. And Sebi sent his associate Olu, was his partner at the time, and they brought us a truckload of iron tonic, and I'm here today. So I give that story so people can understand that I entered the world in blood, sick, on a deathbed. Like I was born to die. And if it wasn't for somebody getting in between that by just offering up something as simple as a tonic, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you right now without having some crazy illness or just not being here at all.
That's why it says born to live.
Yes, exactly. So with that, my mother was like, I got to learn this stuff. She married him, became another wife. Because she married him, I became his son. And because I became his son, I got raised up with the information by not him sitting down in a classroom writing on a chalkboard, but him telling me stories and me being around observing everything that was going on around me so that I can interpret, you see. So every year I got older, biology, physiology, plants, herbs, I soaked it all in until I got old enough where I realized that I had a plethora of information that the average person didn't have.
So now, this brings us back into that health and well-being and understanding, as we said earlier, that majority of people nowadays are sick. And what do you see in the world today of people's mindsets of the way it works in the forms of understanding about the plants and the food and nature itself?
People are plagued by tradition. People are plagued by tradition. This is the problem with tradition. We're in the year 2017. So technically, a tradition can date back to 1950. Like that's actually far enough in the past where someone could have started something and it gets perpetuated in the family to now in 2017 where they'll say this is the tradition of our family. We can go back to 1900, we go back to 1850. But my thing is this, just because it's a tradition doesn't mean it's right. Like it's tradition that we get shot up in the streets. It's tradition that we don't make our ends meet. It's tradition that we don't achieve a higher status in society. But that don't mean it's right. It just means that it represents a stint of time so far. But what happens if we go back before that time?
But wouldn't you think that's kind of like coming from like being indoctrinated from birth?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the indoctrination from birth is based on tradition.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The reason why the mother and the father is communicating, programming, and instilling certain principles in you is because of their environment and what their mother and father instilled in them, which is still a tradition. Their mother and father instilled principles in them. That principle could be macaroni and cheese is all good. But the macaroni and cheese came into the family maybe 150 years ago. 200 years ago, wasn't eating macaroni and cheese. They were eating passion fruit.
Yeah.
They were eating tiger nut. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But at some point in time, someone introduced some foreign concept, some foreign body to them that they tasted, they enjoyed, like any drug is when you get involved with a drug for the first time, right? It's all about dopamine being released. They get that reward system, so they start flushing that dopamine. So then they're like, I'm going to start making this from this point on. So now the family starts eating macaroni and cheese. So now that woman meets a man and they make a baby off macaroni and cheese. So now that baby has that macaroni and cheese in them now. And as long as they eat macaroni and cheese, they're going to fall susceptible to the problems and issues that macaroni and cheese provides. And then each generation after that, macaroni and cheese, macaroni, and everything else that comes in, candies and other meats and other synthetic brands. And as we get further in the future, you find out that now things aren't even getting grown anymore. Things are getting cloned. You got the GMOs. You got all this stuff that's now getting put into the genetic structure that was not around 200 years ago. You see? So as this perpetuates and this keeps on happening, you start having diseases pop up. Now, when we say disease, it's just a word. What is it, though?
But you know when they say, like for instance, they say that most diseases or whatever it is that's in most of them are coming through blood systems. Like your blood is your riverbed.
Oh yes.
And what you're saying is that the diseases, how would they get in? Is it because it's lack of minerals, or what would you say, more of something that goes in the blood?
Let me put it this way. let's say we're building a car.
Yeah.
All right. A decent car, Mercedes-Benz. Okay. Mercedes-Benz costs the amount Mercedes-Benz costs because of the materials they use, right, and how efficient the automobile performs, right? Okay. Now let's say a new generation comes in to make Mercedes-Benz, and they found out that you can use a certain plastic, you can use certain this, that, and you could cut corners.
Yeah.
So they use those materials to build this Benz. Then another generation comes, and they use more synthetic things until you get 100 years down the line. That new Benz ain't nothing like that old Benz, so it's not going to perform the same way. That's all diseases are. Diseases are your body communicating to you of the lack of material, nutrients, light, or whatever it needs to properly function. That's why it's called dis-ease, because you're not in ease anymore. You're not flowing anymore. And that dis-ease is brought about because of the lack of things. And the lack of things come from the tradition, the false tradition that got instilled somewhere along that family line that now is in you. The beautiful thing about it is, at any moment's time, if you return to whatever was being eaten prior to those 200 years, your genetics are strong enough and smart enough to know to revert back to that time. So you'll leap over all that disease and all those problems your parents were dealing with and get back to who you really supposed to be.
Okay. So, like, in general, like, you know, a lot of people, they go through this thing where they say, okay, I'm going to take a 24-day detox or 21-day detox or 7-day detox. But what I find is that a lot of people do these detox, but then they become lost because they don't know where to go from that point of finishing off their detox.
Well, yeah, that's because they're just doing a detox and they're not learning about who they are. It's your heart. It's your lungs. Okay. You win a Mercedes-Benz, right? Would you loan it to me? Can I borrow your Benz on the second day you own it? Can I use it?
It depends.
It depends. Come on now.
It depends. I might drive the car and I say I don't like it, and I'll say, you know what, you can borrow it for the day.
I could borrow it for the day, right? If I take that thing for a week or a year, you're probably gonna have a problem. You know what I'm saying? My thing is this: we put value in things that we're not supposed to put value in. The same way you understand your Benz and what type of fuel that thing needs and what type of oil change it needs and what type of tires it needs. A certain person gets inside your car, you tell them there's no eating in my car. There's a certain way that you carry yourself based on this car, this automobile, this hunk of cold metal that got nothing to do with you. But you having your own Mercedes-Benz, the highest form of Mercedes-Benz, you don't show that same respect to the parts that make you up. So it's like the problem we keep having is the fact that no one wants to learn who they are. They want to put their self on another individual and then wonder why things aren't working in the future, because you never got to know yourself. You need to learn how your lungs work. You need to learn what your pancreas does. You have to learn how your respiratory system functions. It's yours. It's what keeps you alive. So that's why I spend so much time trying to educate people on the processes. It's not so much I know big words. I find it funny that people say, oh man, all them big words. But when I hear anybody else in the conscious community speaking, like Alkebalon, that's a rather big word too. You know, Homo erectus and all those other terms that they use to describe the diaspora and to describe African this and black power that. Like, what, I got to do a one-syllable word to describe things to you? No. You know, these are things that you need to know. And then the other thing, like African names. Like, they're usually about 18 syllables long. You know what I'm saying?
But then
you got to get them to tell you what it is. There's a ritual for every single
one. I said there's always a ritual for each one.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, if you can utilize big words in that aspect, then why, when it comes to your body, all of a sudden it's some big word that you can't relate to? It's like we try every way we can not to learn who we are. We do not want to know the processes of our body, because if you know how the kidney works, then you'll understand what dialysis is. And then when it gets offered to you, you know to say no. But if you don't know how your kidney works and you don't know what dialysis is, but you see this guy in this white coat and he got all these plaques on the wall and his check is fat, and someone referred you to him, then you're just going to go off that word of mouth and be like, yeah, put me on it.
Okay, so now we're getting to that stage where, like, understand, like, the as we said that about the blood being the riverbed, and just go into a Pacific, like a lot of women have what we call fibroids. What is your explanation over it?
Oh, fibroids, as I was speaking to the brother earlier, actually has a lot to do with light, as well as prostate health with men. Both of those deal with the reproductive system, okay? If you're dealing with fibroids, you're dealing with the womb. So what is occurring right there? Well, we all know that women are really the guidance mechanism for time. Even though we say father time, women are really the clock, okay? Because whether or not we had a clock or not, if you got a woman, you know when her cycle is, okay?
Let me ask you just one quick question, though. Do you think a womb can think?
Do I think a womb can think?
Yeah.
Well, a womb is a creatrix. I mean, that's how everything is formed. There has to be thought in it. But the thought is placed in the womb by way of the man with the spark. So there's kind of an exchange of thought that occurs. Every part of your body can think because it's made of cells, and each cell has a magnetic field. And I could pull one cell out of your body, and then that'd be Terry. That one cell.
So how would you say the heart? How do the heart think?
How does the heart think?
Yeah, itself.
Itself?
Yeah.
The heart.
What was its function of how it thinks? Can you give me a little breakdown on it?
Of how the heart thinks itself? Well, it depends on in the context of it, but I could discuss it on different levels. First of all, the heart is an organ. Organs are made of tissues. Tissues are made of cells. Okay, cells themselves have mitochondria, and each one of these cells create its own magnetic field. If you create your own magnetic field, you're aware of what's around you. Now, in addition to that, the heart is constantly pumping. What is it pumping? It's pumping blood. This blood contains iron. This iron is a magnetic field. And as it flows through left ventricle, right ventricle, right atrium, and throughout the body, it's following a particular path. This path that it creates, this geometric shape that it creates as it flows, creates a magnetic field, and this magnetic field encompasses who you are. So anything that this field wraps around, it's aware of. Okay, from the smallest cell all the way to the organ systems that make up the full body. Yeah.
So now let's go back to that fibroids again.
Yes, the fibroids. So the women, like I said, they're the clock because of their cycle, monthly clock. You understand what's going on throughout the month. What's happening during a woman's cycle? Well, their body is getting prepared for reproduction. Their endometrium is swelling up. This is the lining of the womb. The endometrium swells up, getting blood vessels and necessary juices and hormones and enzymes there. So when the fertilized egg attaches, it can start to develop. Now, if the egg isn't fertilized, then there's no reason for the endometrium to stay engorged. So it has to shed that layer. So all that blood is broken blood vessels, but because it's the womb is the landfill for the woman. All poisons, all toxins, all negative thoughts, all xenobiotics, meaning pollution that comes from the environment, everything that they're dealing with, the toxic men they deal with, all that gets dumped in their womb. And when they go through a cycle, that's what comes out. So when women bleed for weeks on end, that's how many toxins they have in them. But eventually, the iron level is going to drop. Their iron level is already lower than ours. But if a cycle is only supposed to be 3 days, and then they recoup for the rest of the month, you see what I'm saying? To build that iron back up, that can work. But if their cycle is a week or 2 weeks, not only did they bleed 3 or 4 times as much iron as they were supposed to, but they have nowhere near enough time to recoup all that. So that means every month they're losing more and more iron, more and more iron, more and more iron, more toxins building up. And then eventually you're going to have cancerous situations where you have rogue cells, anarchists, that feel they can do better. So they start to split, they start to divide, and they start to grow. You see? And that's what these fibroids are. It's just a fancy way of saying a tumor. It's just not active.
Because you've just stepped on something. Because I'm always saying, you know, there's a lot of people out, especially a lot of men, they have prostate cancer.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want you to give a breakdown, because a lot of guys, when I say to them, you know what, let's all go for a test, they're doing a runner.
Oh, yeah.
So I just want you to just kind of like...
You say you go to a man and tell him to test himself for anything, they ain't going to do it. We just not with that, right?
But you see, because you stepped on that form of cancer, I just wanted to have a quick breakdown on that prostate cancer.
Let me complete the light connection. So, we have a circadian rhythm. What is circadian rhythm? Okay, circadian rhythm has to deal with the rhythm of the sun rising and the sun setting and our relationship with light and darkness. Okay, in order for us to move around in any environment, we have to be able to identify 3-dimensional objects. That's how we move around and navigate. That's how we see our path. A 3-dimensional object is only 3-dimensional based on what? Lighting. Depth perception, shade, the difference of colors. That's how we're able to determine what's what. Now, when the sun comes up in the morning, the light goes through your eyes, you have something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's also known as the SN. This is your biological clock that runs 24 hours in 2 sets of 12 hours, just like the clock we use. All right? When the light comes in, it tells the SN what time it is based on the light coming in, because there's a certain amount of light that comes up when the sun rises. The SN then lets the hypothalamus know, and then the hypothalamus can then let your leptin receptors know. Do you know what leptin is? Leptin is the chemical that tells you you're satisfied.
Okay.
So if you're eating,
It's enough. It's enough.
right, that's the thing that says it's enough. Not that you're full. That's the difference. Filling up your gut and being satisfied is 2 different things.
So when the European man punches us, when we say enough's enough, sometimes it doesn't stop.
Because their leptin receptors do not work. They don't know what satiety is. That's why. No satiation. So
Yeah.
what happens is the leptin receptors right there. So what can end up happening is, if we're not attuned with the day properly, then the internal structure of our body, remember, our body's inside. There's no eyeballs in there. So the only reason that the way the body knows what's going on is based upon the light that comes in and the signals that the brain sends down to the body. But when I'm on my cell phone at 3 in the morning and that artificial blue light is going into my eyes, it's telling my body it's noon. And if it's noon, that means that my body is now going to act like it's 12 o'clock. So your reproductive system, right, which will respond to stresses, high cortisol levels, high norepinephrine, high adrenaline levels, fight or flight, is going to affect the production of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and all those type of things. So that's how the womb will directly get affected, and that's exactly how prostate will get directly affected, because we're all sleeping crazy hours. 1/4 of the country in the U.S. work overnight shifts.
Yeah.
Oh, they're super troubled. You know, and they don't understand why they go through all those diseases. That's because we live in an existence that requires us to be in tune with the sun and the moon. And if we do not get in tune with the sun and the moon, it throws off the coordination, the clock inside our body. All right? If I go inside UPS, I go inside FedEx, and I jumble up all of their packages and their addresses and everything, people are not going to get their stuff. It's going to be chaos. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So when we get the proper light in and we get our proper rest, everything gets in working order again. So any person who has fibroids, any person who has prostate problems, I say the first thing they need to do is get a regular sleep pattern, get some proper rest, and that'll take you far longer than anything else. And the reason why I say that is because we have to get out of the fact that food is the answer to our health. It's really light is the answer to our health. It's just that food contains light. And if you understand that, then you know what foods to eat. Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to go into the part, because you've kind of pushed it into that now.
Okay.
In the spiritual system.
Okay.
Now, do you use kind of like all the kind of African spiritual systems, or find out the relationships with them, or do you go to a Pacific?
I deal with them all, and the reason why I deal with them all is because, you know, when you deal with the different systems, you deal with deities. And when you deal with deities, people are like, I can't deal with systems that got all these gods. And it's like, it's not about all these gods. It's about there being an all-powerful, pervasive force, and that there's a multitude of aspects of him.
Because you know what it is? I've always tried to tell people to take the concept of God. Because, you know, like as I said, like if something's been indoctrinated from a child, so if I've been learning the church system for, let's say, 30 years, now I've come out of the church system and then I've gone into the forms of deities and whatsoever. But the problem is I still got that program mindset of having seen gods as in gods. Right. So I'm seeing multiple gods, not knowing that each god is a part of me.
Yes, as aspects, and each aspect represents elementals, represents air, represents fire, represents water, represents earth, represents metal, represents air and water being vapor. You see what I'm saying? Representing earth and water making mud. So it's aspects, and these aspects and these elementals help you to understand how to manipulate one of the greatest charts that we have, and that's the periodic table of elements. See, once we understand the periodic table of elements and the different accretion levels of hydrogen, we can do so much more with ourselves. You see, because it all deals with the elements. So that's why it starts with L, and that's why it ends with mental. Because it's about your mind being able to manipulate the atom, or atum, right, which was given birth by the 8, the Ogdo, the sacred 8. You know what I mean? The sacred 8 represents the mixing and mingling that had to occur before anything physical can be produced. And the physical thing that got to be produced, the mound. See, the mound represents the wave. That's it. It's not literally physical land. It's the intention. It's the idea. It's the swelling of something. And once you swell something up, once there's an initial swelling, something gets produced. And the thing that got produced was Atum. And then Atum gave birth to the Ennead, or the Sacred 9. But see, that Sacred 9 only came based upon that hydrogen.
So now let's go into that same thing of thought. What okay. But looking at the aspects of that, what made you go into the forms of explaining and breaking down films? The thought process behind it and relating it to your thoughts and your mind of breaking it down.
Okay.
Yo, niggas make a little pain, now they feel they made it. Still rock chains and whips, still on a slave ship. Our history is there and the rest can't change it. Schools don't teach it, seek it is sacred. On a die, mother and father is the basics. Rise like you're supposed to slip out the matrix. Still dumbstruck thinking this is entertainment. Escape to reality, most lives are wasted.